appearance of the bright reflection. The disciple James used the mirror as figurative of God's word when urging persons to become, not just hearers of the word, but doers of it. Jas 1. 22-25 And the Apostle Paul showed that Christians reflect like mirrors the glory of Jehovah in their ministry. 2 Co 3. 18. 4. 1. Miscarriage. See abortion. Mishal Misha middle dot L possibly, who is like God. Or, who belongs to God. 1. A Kohathite Levite and son of Uzziel. X 6. 18, 22 After Aaron's sons Nadab and Abihu were executed by Jehovah for offering illegitimate fire, Mishael and his brother Elzaphan carried their bodies outside the camp. La 10. 1-5. 2. The original name of one of Daniel's 3 Judean companions who was named Meshach by the principal court official of Babylon. Da 1. 6, 7. See Meshach. 3. One of the men who stood at Ezra's left hand when the copyists read from the book of the law to the Jews assembled in Jerusalem after the Babylonian exile. Eni 8. 3, 4. Mishal Mishal place of making inquiry. A border city of Asher given to the Gershonite Levites, apparently Otex to a acute Muritra Longo, Mizpah 416 Mizpah possibly, number. A leading person among the Jews returning with Zerubbabel from Babylonian exile. As 2. 1, 2 He is called Mispereth at Nehemiah 7. 7. Mispereth Mispeh middle dot Wraith. One of the prominent leaders among the Jews returning with Zerubbabel from Babylonian exile in 537 BCE and E7. 6, 7 In a parallel account his name is spelled Mispah. As 2. 2. Misrephoth Maim Misri middle dot Foth Marim burnings at the waters. A point to which the Israelites pursued the armies of northern Canaanite kings allied with Jabin after having defeated them at the waters of Merom. Jos 11. 1-5, 8 When the promised land was divided into inheritance portions, the area extending from Lebanon to Misrephoth Maim remained to be conquered. Jos 13. 2, 6 Some tentatively identify Misrephoth Maim with the ruins at Bet El Masheri Fehorvat Mashref, about 20 kilometers 12 Mieneni of Akko. This location would have provided the citizens of Misrephoth Maim access to the cities in the plain of Akko and also the Hula Basin. Perhaps Misrephoth Maim meaning burnings at the waters got its name from the warm springs situated about 180 meters 590 feet from the site. Mist. Particles of water floating in the air. They resemble very light rain. When warm humid air rises from the earth and cools to what is called a dew point, moisture condenses because cool air cannot hold as much water as warm air. If this occurs near the ground, it is called fog. If it takes place higher in the sky, it forms what is called a cloud. PS 135. 7. PR 25. 14. J 10. 13. 51. 16 Moisture that condenses on cool objects, such as the ground or vegetation usually at night, is described as dew. X 16. 13, 14. JG 6. 36-40. See dew. Mist, on the other hand, is composed of airborne particles of moisture that are somewhat larger in size than fog particles, but smaller than raindrops. The Bible's poetic description of these geophysical processes accords with scientific findings. Elihu tells how Jehovah, the source of all heat and energy, first causes the moisture to be drawn up from the earth and then allows it to trickle slowly and drip back in the form of rain and mist. Heb. Ed, as if filtered. Job 36. 27, 28. In the Genesis account of conditions here on the earth at a certain point during the creative days is found the only other occurrence of the Hebrew word ed mist. Jehovah God had not made it rain upon the earth, but the mist would go up from the earth including the streams, lakes, and seas, and it watered the entire surface of the ground. GE 2. 5, 6 Translators of ancient versions LXX, VG, C, however, understood the reference to be, not to a mist, but to a fountain, suggesting that watering was accomplished by means of an underground freshwater stream. Figurative use. In the city of Paphos on the island of Cyprus, Bar-Jesus Elymas, a sorcerer and false prophet, opposed Paul when the apostle was speaking to the proconsul Sergius Paulus. Paul told him that Jehovah's hand was upon him and that he would be blind for a period of time. Instantly a thick mist and darkness fell upon him. Apparently his sight became misty, or foggy, followed quickly by intense darkness. In describing the incident, the physician Luke employed a Greek medical term amidal. Lies thick mist. Act 13. 4-11. The Apostle Peter, in his warning against the false teachers and would-be corrupters who would quietly slip into the Christian congregation, says, "These are fountains without water, and mists driven by a violent storm, and for them the blackness of darkness has been reserved." Travelers in the Middle East were familiar with the disappointment of approaching a fountain or well with hope of getting refreshing water, only to find it dried up. In Palestine, in the month of August, there are occasional cirrostratus clouds from the W that do not bring rain. A farmer who looked to these wispy, mist-like clouds as Zotextoi acute muritra longo, Myasbar 417 etri forces. It is not known whether Mithnite refers to his place of origin or is his family designation. 1ch 11. 26, 43. Mithrat Mithri middle. Ath from Persian, meaning gift of Mithra. 1. The treasurer of Cyrus who, under royal command, turned over some 5,400 temple utensils of gold and silver to the Israelites for return to Jerusalem. As 1. 7, 8, 11. 2. An opposer of the post-exilic temple reconstruction who shared with others in writing a letter to Persian king Artaxerxes falsely accusing the Jews. As 4. 7. Mytilene met middle.y. The principal city of Lesbos, an island in the Aegean Sea off the W coast of Asia Minor. While en route to Jerusalem in about 56 CE, the Apostle Paul sailed to Mytilene from Assos, a seaport on the mainland of Asia Minor about 45 kilometers 28 mi to the NNW. Act 20. 14. The fact that no mention is made of Paul's going ashore may imply that the ship merely anchored at Mytilene, perhaps because the needed end winds had abated. On the following day the ship continued SSW toward Chios. Act 20. 15. It is believed that Mytilene originally occupied a small island off the eastern coast of Lesbos. But as the city grew it may have been linked with Lesbos by a causeway and expanded along the coast. This would have created a harbour on the N side and also one on the S side of the causeway. The city was famed as a seat of literary learning and for the architectural beauty of its buildings. Mixed company. A group of alien strangers who departed from Egypt with the nation of Israel. X 12. 37, 38, FTN. Compare X 12. 43-49. Some of these people may have been Egyptians or other foreigners who chose to follow the true God and the nation of Israel after witnessing a number of Jehovah's blows against Egypt. Others of this group were likely Egyptians who had married Israelites as well as the offspring of such unions. The Israelitess Shelomith of the tribe of Dan, for example, had an Egyptian husband and at least one son by him. La 24. 10, 11. This same group is also called the mixed crowd or the cluster of people. The rabble in Numbers 11. 4. Doubtless both their non-Israelite background in the rigors of the wilderness trek prompted a complaining spirit among them that became a source of contention. Their expression of selfish longing spread to the Israelites, so that they too began to weep and say, "How we remember the fish that we used to eat in Egypt for nothing, the cucumbers and the watermelons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. Our eyes are on nothing at all except the manna." U 11. 4-6. At Nehemiah 13. 3 and Jeremiah 25. 20. The expression mixed company denotes non-Israelites. The Nehemiah reference pertains to such foreigners as Moabites and Ammonites. NE 13. 1. That the sons of these foreigners half Israelite may also have been included is suggested by the fact that earlier the Israelites dismissed both their foreign wives and sons. As 10. 44. Mizpah, meaning watchtower. 1. A region inhabited by Hivites and situated at the base of Mount Hermon was known as the land of Mizpah. Jos 11. 3. At least part, if not all, of this area may also have been called the valley plain of Mizpah. Jos 11. 8. The land of Mizpah possibly was the region around Benias Caesarea Philippi to the east of Mount Hermon or the plain of Mount Hermon along the Wadi at time. 2. A Judean city in the Shephelah. Jos 15. 33, 38. Its precise location, however, is in question. One suggested identification is Bet-Safia, about 9 kilometers 5.5 miles of ancient Azekah. 3. A city in the territory of Benjamin. Jos 18. 26, 28. Although some suggest Sam will see 8 kilometers 5 mi and W of Jerusalem as a possible identification, most favor Tel Anasbasi. 12 kilometers 7.5 mi of Jerusalem for the ancient site. An interpretation of certain archaeological findings seems to favor Otextoi acute Miritra Longo. Mizraim 418 occasion the Israelites fasted and confessed their sins. When word about their assembly at Mizpah reached the Philistines, they took advantage of the situation to launch an attack. But Jehovah threw the enemy into confusion, enabling the Israelites to subdue the foe. Apparently to commemorate this God-given victory, Samuel erected a stone between Mizpah and Jeshanah, calling it Ebenezer, meaning stone of help. Thereafter Samuel continued judging Israel and, as he did so, made a yearly circuit of Bethel, Gilgal, and Mizpah. 1-7. 5-16 Later, in 1117 BCE another assembly at Mizpah witnessed Samuel's introducing Saul as Israel's first king. 1-10. 17-25. In the 10th century BCE Mizpah was built up by Judean King Asa with materials from Ramah, a city that Israelite King Baasha had been forced to desert. 1 Kai 15. 20-22. 2 Ch 16. 4-6 Some 3 centuries later, in 607 BCE the victorious Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar appointed Gedaliah as governor over the Jews remaining in the land of Judah. Gedaliah administered affairs from Mizpah. There the prophet Jeremiah took up residence. Also, surviving army chiefs and other Jews who had been scattered came to Mizpah. Governor Gedaliah, although having been forewarned, failed to exercise caution and was assassinated at Mizpah. Chaldeans and Jews with him there were likewise slaughtered. Thereafter 70 visiting men also met their death. The band of assassins, led by Ishmael the son of Nethaniah, took the rest of the people captive. Overtaken by Johanan the son of Kareah, Ishmael escaped with 8 men, but the captives were rescued, later to be taken to Egypt. 2 Kai 25. 23-26. Jah 40. 5. 41. 18. Following the Babylonian exile, men of Mizpah and the princes Shalon and Ezer shared in repairing the wall of Jerusalem. Etni 3. 7, 15, 19. 4. A city of the Jordan in Gilead JG 10. 17. 11. 11, 29, perhaps the same place as the Mizpah mentioned at Hosea 5. 1. Mizpah was the home of Jephthah. JG 11. 34. Some propose a location at Ornik, but Gilad, about 23 kilometers 14 mi and W of Rabba Aman. But its exact location is uncertain. 5. A city of Moab where David, while outlawed by King Saul, settled his parents. 1-22. 3. Mizpah's precise location cannot be established definitely. Some scholars believe it may be the same place as Kiev Moab. Issa 15. 1. Others have suggested Rusmelm's Crif situated WSW of Madaba ancient Deborah as an identification. Mizraim Mizare Middle.im. Listed second among the sons of Ham. GE 10. 6. Mizraim was the progenitor of the Egyptian tribes as well as some non-Egyptian tribes, and the name came to be synonymous with Egypt. GE 10. 13, 14. 50. 11. Thus, the word Egypt in English translations actually renders the Hebrew mitzmiddle.raim or ma-middle.tsor in a few cases. 2 Kai 19. 24. Issa 19. 6. 37. 25. Mix 7. 12. In the Amarna tablets, written in Akkadian, the Canaanites refer to Egypt as Mishri, similar to the modern Arabic name for the land Misr. Many scholars hold that Mizraim is a dual form representing the duality of Egypt, that is, Upper and Lower Egypt, but this is conjectural. See Egypt, Egyptian. The names of Mizraim's descendants are apparently plural forms. Ludim, Anamim, Lhabim, Naphtahim, Pathruzim, Kazlahim, and Kaphtarim. GE 10. 13, 14. 1ch1. 11, 12. For this reason it is usually suggested that they represent the names of tribes rather than individual sons. Although this is possible, it should be noted that there are other names that appear to be dual or plural in their construction, such as Ephraim, Apaim, and Adlaim. GE 41. 52. 1ch2. 30, 31. Ho 1. 3, each obviously referring to only one individual. Misa Mizah. A sheik of Edom. A descendant of Esau through Ruel. GE 36. 17. 1ch1. 34-37. Mizah was Esau's grandson, as he is included among the sons or grandsons of Basemath, Esau's wife, who was Ishmael's daughter and the mother of Ruel. GE 36. 2, 3, 10, 13. Nasano textoi acute miritra longo. Moab 419. Valley of Zad in the east. The torrent valley of Arnon in the Yamna, distance of some 50 kilometers 30 mi. The Dead Sea forming the W boundary and the Arabian Desert an undefined E boundary. New 21. 11-13. 2. 8, 9, 13, 18, 19. Rising sharply from the Dead Sea, this region is chiefly a tableland slashed by gorges and has an average elevation of some 900 meters, 3,000 feet above the Mediterranean Sea. In ancient times it afforded pasture for vast flocks to Kai 3. 4 and supported vineyards and orchards. Compare Issa 16. 6-10. J 48. 32, 33. Grain was also cultivated. Compare to 23. 3, 4. There was an earlier period when the land of Moab extended end of the Arnon and included the desert plains of Moab across the Jordan from Jericho. New 22. 1. But sometime before the arrival of the Israelites, Amorite king Sihon annexed this region, and the Arnon came to be Moab's end boundary. New 21. 26-30. JG 11. 15-18. The Ammonites also suffered defeat at the hands of Sihon and were pushed to the north and east. The territory conquered from both peoples by the Amorites formed a wedge between Moab and Ammon, and thus Moab came to be bounded by Amorite territory on the north and Edomite territory on the south. JG 11. 13, 21, 22. Compared to 8, 9, 13, 14, 18. At its greatest extent the territory of Moab was approximately 100 kilometers 60 mi from N to S and 40 kilometers 25 mi from E to W. Probably, because a part of Amorite territory had once belonged to Moab, it continued to be called the land of Moab. 1. 5. It was in this former Moabite territory that the Israelites encamped before crossing the Jordan. New 31. 12. 33. 48-51. There a second census was taken of Israel's able-bodied men from 20 years old upward. New 26. 2-4, 63. Also their divine commands and judicial decisions were received about Levite cities, cities of refuge, and inheritance. New 35. 1. 36. 13th. There Moses delivered his final discourses and concluded with Israel a covenant urging faithfulness to Jehovah. 1. 1-5. 29. 1. Finally Moses ascended Mount Nebo to view the promised land and then died. For 30 days on the desert plains of Moab, Israel mourned Moses' death. 32. 49, 50. 34. 1-6, 8. Moab's relationship to Israel. As descendants of Abraham's nephew Lot, the Moabites were related to the Israelites. The languages of both peoples were very similar, as is seen from the inscription on the Moabite stone. Also, like the Israelites, the Moabites appear to have practiced circumcision. 9. 25, 26 Nevertheless, with few exceptions, such as Ruth and King David's mighty man Ithmaru 1. 4, 16, 17. 1 ch 11. 26, 46, the Moabites manifested great enmity toward Israel. Before Israel's entry into the Promised Land. The Song of Moses about Jehovah's destroying Egypt's military might in the Red Sea indicated that news of this event would cause the despots of Moab to tremble. X 15. 14, 15 That the Moabites did become fearful is indicated by their kings denying Israel peaceful passage through his realm about 40 years later. JG 11. 17 Because of a direct command from God, the Israelites, however, did not attack the Moabites, but upon coming to Moab's southern boundary at the torrent valley of Zid, they skirted the territory of Moab. New 21. 11-13. 2. 8, 9. JG 11. 18 Although the Moabites did sell food and water to the Israelites 2. 26-29, they did not come to Israel's aid with bread and water. 23. 3, 4 Evidently this means that the Moabites did not receive them hospitably and supply provisions without seeking gain. Later, after crossing the torrent valley of Arnon, Israel was confronted by the Amorites under King Sihon, who had earlier seized Moabite territory and of the Arnon. Following their God-given victories over this ruler and also King Og of Bashan, the Israelites encamped on the desert plains of Moab. New 21. 13, 21. 22. 1. 2. 24. 3. 8 The extensive Israelite camp frightened the Moabites and their king Balak, O textoi acute miritra longo. Moab 420 expanded their territory and of the Arnon and, in the reign of their king Eglon, occupied Israelite territory W of the Jordan at least as far as the city of palm trees, Jericho. JG 3. 12, 13. Compared to 34. 3. Israel's subservience to Moab continued for 18 years until Ehud, a left-handed Benjamite, killed King Eglon while having a private audience with him. Ehud then led the Israelites against Moab, striking down about 10,000 Moabites and subduing them. JG 3. 14-30. In this general period, when famine affected Judah, Elimelech, with his wife Naomi and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, emigrated to the more fertile land of Moab. There the sons married Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. After the death of the 3 men in Moab and improvement of conditions in Israel, Naomi, accompanied by Ruth, returned to Bethlehem. There Boaz, a kinsman of Elimelech, married Ruth, who had abandoned the polytheism of the Moabites and had become a worshipper of Jehovah. Thus Ruth, a Moabitess, became an ancestress of David and therefore also of Jesus Christ. Ru 1. 1-6, 15-17, 22. 4. 13, 17. Also in the time of the judges, Israel began venerating the deities of the Moabites, doubtless including their god Chemosh. JG 10. 6. New 21. 29. J 48. 46 For adopting such false worship of neighboring peoples, the Israelites lost Jehovah's favor and suffered at the hands of their enemies. JG 10. 7-10 As late as the time of Samuel, unfaithful Israel experienced harassment from the Moabites. 1 12. 9-11. During reigns of Saul, David, and Solomon. Difficulties with the Moabites continued for years afterward. Israel's first king, Saul, victoriously warred against them. 1 14. 47 Since the Moabites would therefore have regarded Saul as an enemy, understandably the king of Moab was agreeable to having the parents of David, the man whom Saul had outlawed, dwell at Mizpah in Moab. 1 22. 3, 4. Later, when David himself ruled as king, there also was warfare between Israel and Moab. The Moabites were completely subdued and were made to pay tribute to David. Apparently at the end of the conflict 2/3 of Moab's fighting men were put to death. It seems that David had them lie down on the ground in a row, and then measured this row to determine the 2/3 to be put to death and the 1/3 to be preserved alive. 2 Ch. 2, 11, 12. 1 Ch. 18. 2, 11. Possibly in the course of the same conflict, Benaiah the son of Jehoiada struck down the 2 sons of Ariel of Moab. 2 Ch. 23. 20. 1 Ch. 11. 22. David's decisive victory over the Moabites was a fulfillment of Balaam's prophetic words uttered over 400 years earlier. A star will certainly step forth out of Jacob, and a scepter will indeed rise out of Israel. And he will certainly break apart the temples of Moab's head and the cranium of all the sons of tumult of war. New 24. 17. Also apparently with reference to this victory, the psalmist spoke of God's regarding Moab as his washing pot. PS 60. 8. 108. 9. David's son Solomon, however, disregarded God's law and married Moabite women who had not become worshippers of Jehovah. To please them, Solomon built a high place to their god Chemosh. Not until some 3 centuries later, during Josiah's reign, was this high place made unfit for worship. 1 Chi 11. 1, 7. 2 Chi 23. 13. Until the Judean exile. Sometime after the secession of Israel from Judah, the Moabites appear to have regained territory of the Arnon. On the black basalt stele known as the Moabite stone, Moab's king Mesha speaks of Israel's king Omri as taking possession of the region of Medeba. Since the Tableland of Medeba was in the territory of Reuben Jos 13. 15, 16, Israel had apparently lost this area to the Moabites so that Omri later had to recapture it. Evidently Moab remained under Israelite control during the reigns of Kings Omri and Ahab. But following the death of Ahab, Moab's king Mesha, who paid to the king of Israel 100,000 otex to execute Miritra Longo, Moab 421 like blood to the Moabites. Wrongly concluding that the allied armies had slaughtered one another, the Moabites abandoned all caution and came to the Israelite camp, only to be put to flight. As the battle progressed, Moabite cities were ruined, good tracts of land were filled with stones, trees were cut down, and springs were stopped up. When King Mesha found himself penned up in the city of Kir-Hareseth with the battle going against him, he, with 700 men, unsuccessfully tried to break through to the king of Edom. Finally he took his firstborn son and offered him up as a burnt sacrifice upon the wall. For this or some other reason there came to be great indignation against Israel and the siege was abandoned. 2 Chi 3. 6-27. As this humiliating defeat did not take place on foreign soil but brought devastation to the land of Moab, reasonably a considerable period of time would have been required for recovery. So it seems likely that it was at an earlier date during Jehoshaphat's reign that Moab combined with the forces of Ammon and the mountainous region of Seir to attack Judah. By Jehovah's intervention the 3 armies turned on one another and destroyed themselves. 2 Ch 20. 1, 22-24. Some scholars believe that this event is alluded to at Psalm 83. 4-9. Compare 2 Ch 20. 14 with PS 83. Sup. In subsequent years enmity continued between Moab and Israel. After the death of the prophet Elisha, marauding bands of Moabites regularly invaded Israel. 2 Chi 13. 20. About 2 centuries later, in Jehoiakim's time, similar Moabite bands contributed to the ruin of Judah during its final years. 2 Chi 24. 2. With the destruction of Jerusalem in 607 BCE, Jews sought refuge in Moab, returning to Judah when Gedaliah was appointed governor. J 40. 11, 12. After the exile. After an Israelite remnant returned from Babylonian exile in 537 BCE, some married Moabite wives. But at Ezra's admonition they dismissed these wives and their children. Ez 9. 1, 2. 10. 10, 11. 44 years later Nehemiah found a similar situation. Many Israelites had taken Moabite wives. Ne 13. 1-3, 23. Moab in prophecy. In harmony with its long history of opposition to Israel, Moab is mentioned among the hard-set enemies of Jehovah's people. Compare Isra 11. 14. condemned for approaching Israel and for pride and haughtiness, Moab was finally to become a desolation like Sodom. Zip 2. 8-11. See also Job 48. 29. Already at the close of the 9th century BCE, Amos wrote that Moab would suffer calamity for burning the bones of the king of Edom for lime. Am 2. 1-3 while some take this to mean that 2 Kings 3. 26, 27 refers to King Mesha's offering up, not his own son, but the firstborn of the king of Edom. This is an unlikely inference. One Jewish tradition, though, does link the event mentioned by Amos with the war waged against Mesha, and claims that sometime after this conflict the Moabites dug up the bones of the king of Edom and then burned them for lime. But the Bible record provides no basis for determining the time involved. Isaiah chapters 15, 16, apparently around the time of King Ahaz's death, and while Assyria dominated in the 8th century BCE, refer to one Moabite city after another as being in line for calamity. He concluded with the words, "And now Jehovah has spoken, saying, within 3 years, according to the years of a hired laborer, the glory of Moab must also be disgraced with much commotion of every sort, and those who remain over will be a trifling few, not mighty." Issa 16. 14. From historical records, the fulfillment of the prophecies of Isaiah and Amos cannot be placed precisely in the stream of time. However, there is evidence that Moab did come under the Assyrian yoke. Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III mentions Salamanu of Moab among those paying tribute to him. Sennacherib claims to have received tribute from Kamuzanadbi, the king of Moab. And Assyrian monarchs Esarhaddon and Otextoe-Akut-Miritra Longo. Modia 422. Archaeological confirmation of the desolation of Moab, the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible observes. Archaeological exploration has shown that Moab was largely depopulated from ca. the beginning of the 6th century, and in many sites from ca. the 8th century. From the 6th century on, nomads wandered through the land until political and economic factors made a sedentary life possible again in the last centuries BC. Edited by G. A. Buttrick, 1962, Volume 3, p. 418. Compares 25. 8-11. Later, in fulfillment of Jeremiah 48. 47, Cyrus, the conqueror of Babylon, likely permitted Moabite exiles to return to their homeland. The accurate fulfillment of the prophecies concerning Moab cannot be denied. Centuries ago the Moabites ceased to exist as a people. Jer 48. 42. Today what are considered to have been such Moabite cities as Nebo, Heshbon, Aroer, Beth-Gamel, and Baal-Meon are represented by ruins. Many other places are now unknown. The sole explanation for the disappearance of the Moabites as a people is provided by the Bible. Noted the 1959 edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica Volume 15, p. 629. Israel remained a great power while Moab disappeared. It is true that Moab was continuously hard-pressed by desert hordes. The exposed condition of the land is emphasized by the chains of ruined forts and castles which even the Romans were compelled to construct. But the explanation is to be found within Israel itself, and especially in the work of the prophets. In view of the disappearance of the Moabites as a people, the inclusion of Moab at Daniel 11. 41 among nations in the time of the end. 11. 40 is logically to be regarded in a figurative sense. The Moabites evidently refer to some of those that the king of the north does not succeed in bringing under his control. For information on the Moabite stone, see Meshano. 2. Modiamo dia possibly, appointed time seasonal festival. Meeting of Jah. A priestly paternal house of which Piltai was the head in the days of Joachim. Ne 12. 12, 17. It has been suggested that Modia is a variation of the name Mahdia, and that Modia is the same person as the priest Mahdia who accompanied Zerubbabel to Jerusalem after the Babylonian exile. Ne 12. 1, 5. Modesty. An awareness of one's limitations. Also chastity or personal purity. The Hebrew root verb na is rendered be modest in Micah 6. 8, its only occurrence. The related adjective nu immodest occurs in Proverbs 11. 2, where it is contrasted with presumptuousness. Although some modern scholars believe that the sense of this root is be cautious, careful, judicious, many take it to mean be modest. For example, the Hebrew and English lexicon of the Old Testament by Brown, Driver, and Briggs, 1980, p. 857 says that the root conveys the idea of one who is retiring, modest, or humble. Modesty is a translation of the Greek eidos. 1t2. 9 is used in a moral sense, expresses the thought of reverence, or respect for the feeling or opinion of others, or for one's own conscience, and so expresses shame, self-respect, a sense of honor, sobriety, and moderation. A Greek-English lexicon by H. Liddell and R. Scott, revised by H. Jones, Oxford, 1968, p. 36, comparing I-dos with the more common Greek word for shame I-skiani. 1 Co 1. 27. PHP 3. 19. Lexicographer Richard Trench says that I-dos is the nobler word, and implies the nobler motive. In it is involved an innate moral repugnance to the doing of a dishonorable act, which moral repugnance scarcely or not at all exists in the I-ski-ne. He states that I-dos would always restrain a good man from an unworthy act, while I-ski-ne might sometimes restrain a bad one. Synonyms of the New Testament, London, 1961, pages 64, 65. Thus, the conscience is especially involved in the restraining effect implied in I-dos. Before God. With regard to modesty, in no textoi acute miritra longo, modesty 423 in what to boast. Boastfulness is the opposite of modesty. The rule is, may a stranger, and not your own mouth, praise you. May a foreigner, and not your own lips, do so. PR 27. 2 Jehovah's own words are, let not the wise man brag about himself because of his wisdom, and let not the mighty man brag about himself because of his mightiness. Let not the rich man brag about himself because of his riches. But let the one bragging about himself brag about himself because of this very thing, the having of insight and the having of knowledge of me, that I am Jehovah, the one exercising loving kindness, justice and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I do take delight. 9. 23, 24. Compare PR 12. 9. 16. 18, 19. God's regard for modest ones. The Apostle Paul shows God's regard for the modest ones, and also cites his own conduct in the congregation as exemplary of such modest attitude. He wrote to the Christians at Corinth, for you behold his calling of you, brothers, that not many wise in a fleshly way were called, not many powerful, not many of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world, that he might put the wise men to shame. And God chose the weak things of the world, that he might put the strong things to shame. And God chose the ignoble things of the world and the things looked down upon, the things that are not, that he might bring to nothing the things that are, in order that no flesh might boast in the sight of God. Just as it is written, he that boasts, let him boast in Jehovah. And so I, when I came to you, brothers, did not come with an extravagance of speech or of wisdom declaring the sacred secret of God to you. For I decided not to know anything among you except Jesus Christ, and him impaled. And I came to you in weakness and in fear and with much trembling. And my speech and what I preached were not with persuasive words of wisdom, but with a demonstration of spirit and power, that your faith might be, not in men's wisdom, but in God's power. 1 Co 1. 26. 2. 5. Do not go beyond the things written. Later in his letter Paul emphasized the need for modesty on the part of all, just as he himself had displayed modesty, a proper evaluation of himself. The Corinthians had fallen into the trap of boasting in certain men, such as Apollos, and even in Paul himself. Paul corrected them, telling them that they were fleshly, not spiritual, in doing this, and said, now, brothers, these things I have transferred so as to apply to myself and Apollos for your good, that in our case you may learn the rule. Do not go beyond the things that are written, that is, do not go beyond the limits that the scriptures set for humans in their attitude toward one another and toward themselves, in order that you may not be puffed up individually in favor of the one against the other. For who makes you to differ from another? Indeed, what do you have that you did not receive? If, now, You did indeed receive it, why do you boast as though you did not receive it? Keeping this in mind will prevent haughtiness and boastfulness in regard to oneself or another as to family descent, race, color or nationality, physical beauty, ability, knowledge, mental brilliance, and so forth. 1 Co 4. 6, 7. Jesus Christ's example. Jesus Christ is the finest example of modesty. He told his disciples that he could not do a single thing of his own initiative, but only what he beheld the Father doing, and that his Father is greater than he is. Job 5. 19, 30. 14. 28. Jesus refused to accept titles not due him. When a ruler called him good teacher, Jesus replied, "Why do you call me good? Nobody is good, except one, God." Luke 18. 18, 19. And he told his disciples that as slaves to Jehovah they should not feel puffed up, either over things accomplished in God's service or because of their worth to God. Rather, they should have the attitude, when they had done all textoi acute mirica longo, Malada 424 shocking to decency, to the moral susceptibilities of the congregation, causing offense to some. This counsel as to dress would shed further light on Jehovah's attitude toward the proper view and use of other material possessions that a Christian may have. See humility. Malada mo middle dot lidar from a root meaning give birth. Become father to. Ba. One of the cities in southern Judah allotted to Simeon. Malada remained in the hands of this tribe at least down till David's reign. Jos 15. 21, 26. 19. 1, 2. 1 ch 4. 24, 28, 31. After the exile, Judeans resettled the site. Ne 11. 25, 26. The site of Malada has not been identified with any certainty. Melech Molech from a root meaning reign as king or king, but with the vowels abosheth, shame, to denote abhorrence. A deity particularly associated with the Ammonites 1 K 11. 5, 7, 33. Possibly the same as Moloch 7. 43. Compare Am 5. 26 and Milcom. 1 K 11. 5, 33 at Jeremiah 32. 35. Melech is referred to in parallel with Baal, suggesting, if not an identification, at least some connection between the two. Numerous authorities regard Melech as a title rather than the name of a specific deity, and therefore, the thought has been advanced that the designation Melech may have been applied to more than one god. It is generally agreed that the Malcham referred to 2 Samuel 12. 30 and 1 Chronicles 20. 2 is the idol image of the Ammonite god Milcom, or Melech, although the Hebrew term could be rendered their king. Compare KJ. As. Earlier in the biblical account the Ammonite king is referred to by his name, Nun 2 10. 1-4. Hence, it is reasonable to conclude that the name, Nun rather than Milcam would have appeared in the scriptural record if the king rather than the idol were intended. Also, it is thought unlikely that a king would have worn a crown weighing about 34 kilograms 92 pounds t. For the same reason it has been suggested that David placed Malcham's crown on his head only temporarily, perhaps to denote his victory over the false god. According to the reading of the Targum, which has been adopted by numerous translators, the crown had only one precious jewel. This has given rise to the view that it was the precious jewel, rather than the crown itself, that came to be on David's head. Child sacrifice to Melech. God's law to Israel prescribed the death penalty for anyone, even an alien resident, who would give his offspring to Melech. The 22-5 Nonetheless, apostate Israelites, both in the kingdom of Judah and in the 10-tribe kingdom, passed their offspring through the fire. 2 Kai 17. 17, 18. As 23. 4, 36-39. Their passing through the fire to Melech has been regarded by some as signifying a purification ritual by means of which children were devoted or dedicated to Melech. Others understand this to mean actual sacrificing. That the Canaanites and apostate Israelites did sacrifice their children, there can be no question. The 12. 31. PS 106. 37, 38 King Ahaz of Judah proceeded to burn up his son's son, see in the fire. 2 ch 28. 3 The parallel passage, a 2 Kings 16. 3, reads, even his own son he made pass through the fire. This indicates that passing through the fire is at least sometimes synonymous with sacrificing. Likely, however, the worship of Molech was not always and everywhere the same. For example, King Solomon, under the influence of his foreign wives, built high places to Molech and other deities, but not until the time of Ahaz is mention made of child sacrifice. 1 Kings 11. 7, 8 Undoubtedly, if this abhorrent practice had existed earlier, it would have been denounced along with the other forms of idolatry existing during the reigns of the various kings. For this reason some commentators favor the view that the expression to pass through the fire originally applied to a purification ritual and later came to signify actual sacrifice. The passing to Molech mentioned in the O Textoi Acute Muritra Longo, Molten c. 425. The view has been advanced that the Molech to whom children were sacrificed had the form of a man but the head of a bull. The image is said to have been heated red hot and the children cast into its outstretched arms, thus to fall into the flaming furnace below. This conception is largely based on the description of the Carthaginian Kronos or Moloch given by the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus of the 1st century BCE. Diodorus of Sicily, XX, 14, 4-6. Regarding the practice of astrology in connection with worship of Molech, see astrologers. Mole rat Heb. Choled. A rodent measuring 15 to 30 centimeters 6 to 12 inches in length. The mole rat Spalaxerantpashi resembles a short-legged, tailless, and neckless cylindrical lump of soft, thick fur, generally a yellowish grey-brown color. The head is recognizable by the furless muzzle and 2 pairs of large protruding teeth. Under the law, the mole rat was unclean for food. Law 11. 29. Although numerous translations render Cho-led as weasel as KJRS, there is a basis for preferring mole rat. In Arabic, a language related to Hebrew, a very similar word, kald, means mole rat. Also, choled may be related to a post-biblical Hebrew term signifying dig or hollow out. This would harmonize with the mole rat's characteristic digging. Mole rats live underground and dig subterranean sleeping quarters and large storage chambers. These creatures subsist on vegetable matter, primarily on roots and bulbs. Thus they differ from true moles, which feed on insects and earthworms and are not considered native to Palestine. Moled from a root meaning give birth. Become father to. Ba. A man of Judah and descendant of Hezron through Drameel. Moled was the son of Abishah by his wife Abiel. 1 ch 2. 4, 5, 9, 25-29. Moloch. See Molech. Molten C. Copper C. When the temple was constructed during Solomon's reign, a molten that is, cast or poured C replaced the portable basin of copper used with the earlier tabernacle. X 30. 17-21. 1 Kai 7. 23, 40, 44 Built by Hiram, a Hebrew Phoenician, it was evidently called a sea, because of the large quantity of water it could contain. This vessel, also of copper, was 10 cubits 4.5 meters, 14.6 feet from its one brim to its other brim, circular all around. And its height was 5 cubits c. 2.2 meters, 7.3 feet, and it took a line of 30 cubits 13.4 meters, 44 feet to circle all around it. 1 Kai 7. 23. Circumference. The circumference of 30 cubits is evidently a round figure, for more precisely it would be 31.4 cubits. In this regard, Christopher Wordsworth quotes a certain Rennie as making this interesting observation. Up to the time of Archimedes 3rd century BCE the circumference of a circle was always measured in straight lines by the radius. And Hiram Woods naturally described the sea as 30 cubits round, measuring it, as was then invariably the practice, by its radius, or semi-diameter, of 5 cubits, which being applied 6 times round the perimeter, or brim, would give the 30 cubits stated. There was evidently no intention in the passage but to give the dimensions of the sea, in the usual language that everyone would understand, measuring the circumference in the way in which all skilled workers, like Hiram, did measure circles at that time. He, of course, must however have known perfectly well, that as the polygonal hexagon thus inscribed by the radius was 30 cubits, the actual curved circumference would be somewhat more. Notes on the King James Version, London, 1887. Thus, it appears that the ratio of 3 to 1, that is, the circumference being 3 times the diameter, was a customary way of stating matters, intended to be understood as only approximate. Of copper. The copper sea was decorated with gourd-shaped ornaments and had as its base 12 figures of bulls, facing north, south, east, and west in groups of 3. The brim of the O textoi acute meter longo money 426 account gives the actual capacity of the vessel if filled to the brim. There is evidence that the bath measure anciently equaled about 22 L 5.8 gallons, so that, if kept at 2/3 capacity, the sea would normally hold about 44,000 L 11,620 gallons of water. For it to have had a capacity indicated, it must not have had straight sides, but instead, the sides below the rim, or lip, must have been curved, giving the vessel a bulbous shape. A vessel having such a shape and having the dimensions stated earlier could contain up to 66,000 L 17,430 gallons. Josephus, Jewish historian of the 1st century CE, describes the sea as in the shape of a hemisphere. He also indicates that the sea's location was between the altar of burnt offering and the temple building, somewhat toward the south. Jewish Antiquities, 8, 79-3, 5. 8, 86-3, 6. In addition to the copper sea there were 10 smaller copper basins resting on carts, and these were evidently filled from the copper sea. 1 Kai 7. 38, 39. Rabbinic tradition is that the sea was equipped with faucets. The 10 basins were used for washing certain sacrifices and likely for other cleansing work, but the sea was for the priests to wash in it. 2 Ch 4. 6. Some rabbis have held that the priests completely immersed themselves in the water of the copper sea, while Josephus says it was for the priests to wash their hands and feet in. Jewish Antiquities, 8, 87-3, 6. Whatever the procedure, the copper sea is associated with priestly cleansing. In prophecy. This may provide a key for understanding the references in the book of Revelation to the glassy sea seen before the throne of God in the Apostle John's vision. Re 4. 6. 15. 2. It was like crystal, perhaps having transparent sides. Compare 21. 18, 21, so that the contents could be seen. Those standing by it, persons victorious over the wild beast and its image, correspond to those called and chosen and faithful ones described at Revelation 17. 14. 20. 4-6. These serve as priests of God and of the Christ and as kings with Christ during his 1,000-year rule. Compare 1 Pe 2. 9. The position of this priestly class next to the glassy sea before God's throne calls to mind the apostles' reference to the Christian congregations being cleansed with the bath of water by means of the word. F5. 25-27. Jesus also spoke of the cleansing power of the word of God that he proclaimed. Job 15. 3. The mingling of fiery 15. 2. With the watery contents of the sea undoubtedly relates to judgments of God, for fire is frequently used in this connection, and God himself is described as a consuming fire toward those rejecting his divine will. Job 12. 25, 29. The symbolism of the glassy sea in John's vision thus illustrates Paul's inspired explanation that the earthly tabernacle and temple with their equipment and priestly functions served as patterns of heavenly things. Compare Job 8. 4, 5. 9. 9, 11, 23, 24. 10. 1. As to the significance of the figures of bulls on which the copper sea of Solomon's temple rested, see bull. Money. A medium of exchange. Anciently, livestock often figured in barter, that is, the exchange of one item for another, and evidently the oldest method of making a business transaction. Indicative of this is the fact that the Latin word for money pecunia is drawn from pecus, meaning cattle. However, livestock G 47. 17 and foodstuffs 1 Chi 5. 10, 11 were not always convenient mediums of exchange. Therefore metals such as gold and silver came to be used. As early as Abraham's time, precious metals served as money. But it was not standard coined money. It consisted of silver and gold, doubtless molded for convenience into bars, rings, bracelets, or other standard shapes having a specific weight. Compare GE 24. 22. Joe 7. 21. The usual Hebrew term rendered money literally means silver. GE 17. 12. FTN often the metal objects o textoi acute miritra longo. Money 427 The value of the piece S of money Heb. Kezita mentioned at Genesis 33. 19. Joshua 24. 32. And Job 42. 11 cannot be definitely established. Likewise the value of the pin is uncertain. It may have been about 2/3 of a shekel. Once a 13. 21. Sepim. Coins in the Hebrew Scriptures. It is commonly believed that the first coins were struck about 700 BCE. The Israelites may have first used coins in their homeland after returning from exile in Babylon. Post-exilic Bible books refer to the Persian Daric 1ch 29. 7. Ezrate. 27 and drachmas Heb. Dar middle.humo middle.nim, which are generally equated with the Daric. Ez 2. 69. Ne 7. 70-72 The Persian gold Daric weighed 8.4 grams, 0.27 Ozt and is therefore presently evaluated at $94. 50. See Daric. Drachma. Money in the Christian scripture period. The Lepton Jewish, quadrans Roman, Azora Syrian Roman and provincial, denarius Roman, drachma Greek, tedrachma Greek, and the stater Greek. Considered by many to be the tetradrachma of Antioch or Tyre coins specifically mentioned in the Christian Greek scriptures. Mount 5. 26. 10. 29. 17. 24, 27. 20. 10. Mr. 12. 42. Lu 12. 6, 59. 15. 8. 21. 2, int. C. denarius. Stater. The much larger monetary values known as minas and talents were weights, not coins. Mount 18. 24. Lu 19. 13-25 The chart that follows shows the relationship between the various monetary units and converts these into approximate modern values. Purchasing power. Modern values for ancient money do not give a true picture of its worth. The Bible, however, provides some indication of purchasing power, and this is helpful in understanding ancient values. In the time of Jesus' earthly ministry, agricultural laborers commonly received a denarius for a 12-hour workday. Mount 20. It may be assumed that in the Hebrew scripture period wages were about the same. If so, a silver shekel would be the equivalent of 3 days' wages. The price of a slave was 30 silver shekels, perhaps 90 days' wages. X 21. 32. Compare 27. 2-7. Hosea the prophet purchased a woman for 15 silver pieces and 1.5 homers 15 ephahs of barley. Likely this payment constituted the full price for a slave. If so, an ephah 22L20 dry quart of barley was then worth 1 shekel. Ho 3. 2. In times of scarcity, prices rose sharply. The 80 silver pieces c. 240 days' wages that at one time might have bought 8 homers 1,760 L 50 bu of barley would, in time of siege, only procure the thinly fleshed head of an ass, an animal unfit for food according to the terms of the Mosaic law. 2 Chi 6. 25. Compare Ho 3. 2. In the 1st century CE 2 sparrows cost an Assyrian 45 minutes' wages, and 5 sparrows could be obtained for double this price. Mount 10. 29. Lu 12. 6 The temple contribution of the needy widow that Jesus observed was even less, a mere 2 lepta 1 quadrans, or 1/64 of a day's wages. Yet Christ Jesus commended her giving as being greater than that of those who had donated much, because she had contributed, not part of her surplus, but all of what she had, her whole living. Mr. 12. 42-44. Lu 21. 2-4 The annual temple tax paid by the Jews was 2 drachmas, or a drachma about 2 days' wages. Mount 17. 24 As a drachma was the equivalent of about a day's wages, a woman might reasonably sweep her whole house and diligently search for a lost drachma.